I'm Dean Obeidallah, and welcome to Salon Talks. And today we're with MSNBC's Joy Reid, host of author of the best-selling book, The Man Who Sold America. And today we talk her brand new book right here, Medgar and Myrlie, a beautiful book about Medgar Evers and his wife, the love story that awakened America, as you put it. Joy, good to see you.
It's so good to be with you, Dean, as always.
So you talk about this first and foremost. You say it's a love story.
Yes.
And I just want to share from that human part, what drew you to this, and why did you want to make that focus, the love story of these two?
Well, because the thing that made me want to write the book is Myrlie Evers. Myrlie Evers-Williams. We're going to give her her full moniker. I had interviewed her before. I interviewed her on the show that you used to come on all the time, AM Joy, but remotely. Right. And so finally, like in 2018, I got a chance to interview her in person. So we flew out to California. This is the first time I'm actually meeting her. And we had this conversation after the segment that was just, it struck me that it stayed with me for more than a year before I was really deciding what to write. And she started talking about Medgar. And she says in her beautiful, deep, resonant voice, Medgar Evers was the love of my life. But she was talking about him in such a present way that I was like, Miss Myrlie, he's been dead for more than 60 years. You're still talking about him like you're like a giggly schoolgirl. This is incredible. Mm-hmm. And she still is deeply in love with this man. And I was like, I've never really seen somebody with that intensity like that. You know, I love my husband. We love our spouses. We love our people. But it's like, she is so intense with it. And I said to her, you should write about this. I know you've written wonderful biographies, but you should write about this. Mm-hmm. And she said, I've written books. You know, I've written so many books. And a year or more went by, and I was trying to decide what to write. You know, and Peter and I are out with my our book agent, and we're just at lunch trying to figure out what to write. And I just thought to myself, I don't want to write another Trump book right now. You know, did that. Right. Wonderful. Bestseller. Happy about it. But I wanted to write about something that I would actually enjoy as a human being. And this love story to me is just struck me as something people needed to know, that you couldn't be a great civil rights leader in that era without something to hold you down and ground you. And love is a great grounding. It's
true. And by the way, if you write another Trump book, can we write it together? I want to do Trump the prison years. When he's in jail, we'll go visit him. Yes. We'll bring him cheeseburgers. Slid under the.
Are we going to really give him cheeseburgers though?
Might not be cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
So there was something else though. You, in the early part of the book, you said the book is a love story, not just about two black people in Mississippi, but that it's a story of a higher love it took for black Americans to love America and to fight for it. And there's such a complicated relationship, as you know, between black America, loving this country, and being treated so and dehumanized through time. How do you navigate that? How do people navigate that in the community?
It is difficult because you understand the country has never loved us, right? I mean, it was legal to kill black people up until probably the 1970s. I mean, you did not see white people, particularly in the South, convicted for killing black people. White people knew that they had, it was like the purge, you know, they had the ability to, let off steam by lynching a man, woman, or child who was black simply for sassing a white woman, reckless eyeballing, basically looking at a white person in a way they didn't like. Even a child could treat an adult man as if they were a child and call them by their first name. You wouldn't be called Mr. or Mrs. You'd be called boy, girl, whatever. And so the indignity of being black in this country has made it very difficult to love America. And yet you had more than 100,000 black men signed up to fight in World War II. And Medgar Evers was one of them. And he goes off at 18 years old, inspired by his brother having done the same thing. He and his brother were very close. He would do whatever Charles would do. And he signs up at 18, and he risks his life the way every white man on Okinawa Beach risked their lives, on Omaha Beach, I should say, sorry. So he's on Omaha Beach just with them. He's in the Red Ball Express in a segregated unit. They're the transportation corps, but they're still risking their lives with the white men. They're all ostensibly fighting fascism. After taking that risk, he comes home, goes back to Decatur, back to Decatur, Mississippi, and he's told to sit to the back of the bus in his uniform. And he says, you know what? No. I'm not going to do that. I've shown my love for this country just like every white man that wore this uniform, and I'm going to be treated just like every white man that wore this uniform. And he, as he said, took the beating of his life. They dragged him off the bus and beat him, but he said he was a different man after that.
It's a remarkable story that you lay out. He comes back in uniform, beaten up for simply sitting in the front of the bus after fighting fascism overseas. And then what is it, I mean, when you look at Medgar Evers, and I think you've talked about this, he's sort of the genesis for the civil rights movement in certain ways. I think Emmett Till's killing, and then you have Medgar Evers. From your point of view, how important was Medgar Evers in this story, the trajectory that got us to the Civil Rights Act finally and the Voting Rights Act?
I think he's pivotal because it was Emmett Till's story that inspired the Montgomery bus boycott, Dr. King's first big act of civil rights activism. But Emmett Till's story would have not been a national story had it not gone to trial. And it would not have gone to trial were it not for Medgar Evers, because it was Medgar, who as field secretary for the NAACP, went out into the Mississippi Delta and compelled these terrified sharecroppers, including Emmett Till's uncle, to testify against these white men, which was a lynchable offense in Mississippi. You could be lynched for speaking up against a white man in court. And he got them to testify, which is how the case even became a case. Mm-hmm. He brought out 3 witnesses and then had to quickly put them on a train to Chicago after they testified, got them out of there because they would have been killed. But he inspired the bravery of people to do the unthinkable, speak out against a white man in court. Now, they were acquitted, wound up selling their story, et cetera, but that case and it being in Jet magazine inspired eons of young Black people in the South to say no more because they were the same age. One of those people was John Lewis, who was the same age as Emmett Till and was one of the young people who said no more. Medgar Evers was the person who was training those young people how to do civil rights work. He was the person who was putting them in these NAACP youth committees where they were teaching them how to deal with police, how to march properly, how to fold your arms when you're being beaten with batons. He was the one training them. One of those people who took that training is James Chaney, who his first act of civil rights activism was to pin an NAACP sticker on his lapel in high school, and he got expelled for it. 5 years later, as a 20-year-old, he is with Goodman and Schwerner when they are lynched in Mississippi, which causes the North to have to deal with civil rights. He is going to testify for the Civil Rights Act that he's been begging for. He's been sending telegrams to Kennedy as the field secretary. Kennedy finally says, I'm going to do it. When Medgar Evers is assassinated, hours after he gives his landmark TV speech saying, I'm going to do this bill, the first person that he hands a copy of that bill to is Myrlie Evers, who comes to the White House to a fellow World War II veteran as her husband, and he hands her a copy of that bill.
And what I found really interesting is that Medgar was aware of using the media to get the story out. And that's something every minority community understands. Like, you can have all the achievements you want internally, but if people are not hearing about it, it can be from your struggles to the horrible struggles, and a Till trial, to just your achievements, to he went in the media, Medgar then is assassinated in his driveway. Unspeakable act. Why do you think it was important? It seems so ahead of the times to be aware that you need to use the media, and he did.
Yeah, he did. He actually published a newspaper. The Mississippi Free Press was a paper that he started with an interracial group of men and women, including John Salter, he's actually indigenous, but he presented as white, so he was able to operate as a white man in Mississippi. They started this newspaper because he was so outraged that when he was a kid, when he was 11, his brother says he was 7, because his brother exaggerated a little bit, but he was 11. He and his brother first saw their first lynching of a man named Willie Tingle, who his father knew, and he had sassed a white woman, was lynched, shot full of holes, and his bloody clothes were left in the Decatur Fairgrounds for a year. And people, the Klan dared anyone to remove them because they wanted everybody Black to understand this is what could happen to you if you speak up in any way. And what outraged Medgar even more than just the brutality of this man was the fact that no one said anything. There was no church service, there were no marches, there were no protests, and he thought the silence was a sign of complete, not complicity, but of terrified acquiescence to a kind of enslavement, and he was not having it. And so his understanding and belief, including with the Emmett Till case, is if you're going to lynch our people and you're not going to convict them, in court, you're going to be forced to reckon with it and deal with it and read about it.
And that's so vitally important. And it's a lesson that even when I read about it, I'm like, wow, that so resonates. And it's something maybe a common understanding today, but I imagine in the 60s, he was so ahead of his time. Now, you mentioned also the family. Like, you made it clear how important Myrlie was. And not just their love story, but she even challenged him at one point, saying, who do you love more?
Yeah.
The movement And to him, the movement was him,
Yeah.
but so was his love for her.
Yeah.
So why was that important for you to share? Because it's unlike anything. Usually just have the story about Martin Luther King and maybe a
Right.
little bit about his widow.
Yeah.
But this was really so much about her story as well.
Because I think what people need to understand is that these men weren't, cast off of a marble statue, right? They're marble statues now, they've got statues to them, but they were just actually real men. They were just regular guys in their 20s and 30s who had, 20-something young wives. And so in addition to being civil rights leaders, they were husbands, fathers. Medgar was the fun dad on the block who was throwing footballs with all the kids. He was living an actual life. And you cannot expect that somebody as a young woman who was a 1950s housewife, who literally married who she thought was going to be an insurance salesman, would just accept that with this insurance sale, you're going to sell civil rights, and we're going to have our house firebombed, and we're going to have death threats every time I pick up the phone. They're going to be saying, I'm going to come and shoot you, shoot your family, shoot your kids, kill your children. That's not the life she signed up for. And I think it's important for us to be real about it. And I really respect it. We did over 6 interviews, 1 in person, most on the phone. She was real with it. She told you, I was not in favor of this. I did not want him applying to University of Mississippi Law School. I did not want him risking his life. I wanted my husband home. I was in love with him and I wanted him home. And that's honest. And we hear now like a little bit more about Michelle Obama's reluctance for Barack Obama to run for president, or Alma Powell's insistence that Colin Powell not. The reluctance is part of the story. And so I wanted to humanize the movement by showing its love, its tension, its arguments, its pain, its depression. That's what people actually really went through in this movement.
And you also had a whole chapter on how to be a civil rights widow.
Yeah, it's my favorite chapter in the book.
Which is very interesting, the idea of, well, she went on to do a lot of great work, even ran for office.
Yeah.
But they also became friends with Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz, Malcolm X's widow. Share a little bit about that, and why is it your favorite chapter? That's interesting.
It's my favorite chapter because it's the chapter where I could really explain to you the difficulty and challenge of being a woman in that situation, and in Myrlie Evers-Williams' case of being the first nationally known civil rights widow, the first to have to write this template. Right. And you think about it, you're a woman, you're a Black woman, and it's the 1960s. So what do you have to be? You can't be loud, you can't be angry, you have to be pretty, you have to dress appropriately, your children have to be perfect, they have to look perfect, they can't cry, they can't scream. Anything you do, as Black people, we're so overjudged. As a Muslim, you understand everything that you do is overjudged, and people will overcorrect to find something negative about you. And they would have taken any opportunity to denigrate her husband, denigrate Medgar, and say it was his own fault that he was dead. And in fact, a lot of the white newspapers at the time did. They said, this is his fault. He shouldn't have been stirring up the Blacks and let the Negroes be quiet. If he had not stirred them up, we wouldn't be dead. It's his own fault. And she knew that that's what they wanted to do. So she is trying to navigate with no template and no one to show her what to do, because no one else had dealt with this, but that she knew, maybe Mamie Till. And there had been plenty of other civil rights widows in the state of Mississippi, but none of them had a TV camera in their face because they were only known locally. She was the first one who walked out to Dan Rather in her face and cameras. And so she wrote a template that then she could share with Betty Shabazz when it happened to Betty. She could share with Coretta when it happened to Coretta. And they became what I call the original group chat. They had to have each other's back because they were on a world stage grieving, and single moms in the 60s and struggling, depressed, angry, but also having to be perfect.
It's interesting when you read through, like you had to do so much research for this book. I know you know the history before, but what is it like to see it in such, you put it all together and see the way that Black people through time have been treated? And there was a quote by James Baldwin, who was a friend of Medgar's, a famous quote from 1961 where he said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time. Yeah. And has it changed that much? I mean, if you're aware and you see injustice, and you wonder, how does it continue? And it either directed against the Black community or the double standard where white people in power, like Donald Trump, are treated vastly different than everyone else.
I mean, to be a Black person in 2024 in America is to be in a state of complete perplexed confusion about what is wrong with a country that hates your history, to this day can't admit even the basics of what was done to your ancestors, can't accept any responsibility for the lack that has carried through the entirety of the existence of you in this country, and think 60 years of relative freedom is enough. Now, blacks, please get out of Harvard. Now, blacks, you can't get any more loans. You can't even give each other loans of $20,000 unless you give white men who get 99% of funding for their businesses. We want 100. And to find out that literally Barack Obama's 2 terms as president are your reparations, and Juneteenth, which you already celebrated anyway, is your reparations, and yet you built this country. You literally physically built this country, and yet the attitude toward you from a lot of your peers and your fellow citizens is just shut up and be grateful. And it's infuriating, and that is why James Baldwin is my favorite writer. He is the greatest writer in American history. But he's speaking a truth that still exists, and he's been long gone, but it's still true.
When you read James Baldwin, or like I'm a big fan of Malcolm X, watch his stuff, and I'm like, wow, the courage to do it at a time where you could be killed for those words,
absolutely,
without any kind of recourse whatsoever.
Yeah,
it's a different level of courage than today, where maybe you can lose a job.
It's so true. And one of the, to be honest with you, one of the things I hope that people get out of this book is the idea of courage. Because I used to tell my students when I used to teach a class at Syracuse, and I taught a class at Howard, I would always tell my students, none of these men, Medgar, Malcolm, or Martin, lived to be the age when Kobe Bryant was when he died. He was 41. Medgar was 37. He was the first and the youngest to die. He died 5 years before Dr. King, 2 years before Malcolm X. He was the first to lose his life before Goodwin, Schwerner, and Cheney. So he was the first to take this journey. And he also knew this journey was coming. He knew he wouldn't live long. He knew he wouldn't be an old man. And the fact that they had the courage to do that people today don't have the courage to accept a mean tweet that's not even on Twitter anymore because it's on a platform nobody except the media reads. The fact that, yes, you will get death threats. You and I have both been there.
Oh, yeah.
You get, rape threats. You get angry N-word. The N-word, I've been called the N-word so many times by people who actually weirdly sign their name in the email, which is really strange. You want me to know your job and your name and everything? And you're fine with that? But you accept that as part of the platform that you are blessed with, and you're so thankful you can speak for not just your people, but this country, and to make this country a better place. The fact that people with money, security guards, people who can afford full-time security won't speak up against that man who wants to be an autocrat, that's shameful.
And then the last 2 questions are about this election I wanted to touch on. First of all, for you, put aside everything. The fact that Donald Trump, over 3 years ago, attempted a coup and incited a terrorist attack and walks free. There's no accountability at all.
I have to sip on this one.
Right, for me, it is, I'm not even kidding, it's intellectually difficult for me to comprehend that this is where we are as a nation, and how could this happen? And the debate should be on the ballot, when the debate should be what prison cell should he be in today? This is, how do we have a lack of accountability like this, and how did we get here?
It is incredible to me, and again, having just written a civil rights book about the 30 some odd years it took to convict Byron Della Beckwith, when everyone knew that he assassinated Medgar Evers in front of his own house and in front of his kids, and he bragged about it for 30 years, and it still took that long to bring him to justice, and it only happened because finally there was an interracial jury with women on it, and that we had to have literal change in who could be on a jury before we get. I am not surprised that it is taking so long for Donald Trump to come to justice, but it is sad, and it is a sad statement on our country's judiciary system, that the scrubs who busted into the Capitol are cooling their heels in jail. Enrique Tarrio is finding out that in fact he is black and Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Because he's in jail. And Donald Trump and Mark Meadows and Rudy Giuliani are playing golf. And we, on this day that you and I are talking, Dean Obeidallah, we just found out after weeks of waiting that voila, the appeals court says Donald Trump cannot, in fact, take SEAL Team 6 and kill his political opponents. It took them weeks to answer that question. There are 2 Americas.
Oh, there are. And last thing about the media, so we're in the 2024 cycle. What are the challenges in corporate media for covering Trump, not normalizing Trump, and also not elevating Trump to he's like president of the United States. If you watch the media, it's Trump, 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 and then Biden. I'm like, who's president? Oh, that guy's president. So, I mean, where does it play? I mean, does it fall on Biden to get more press? Is it corporate media understands that, look, they're a for-profit business. We're not pretending. We know what it's about. Yeah. That Trump's good for business, so they're just going to keep covering him. I mean, where's the push and pull? What's the right route?
It is a challenge because we have to balance, we have to state the threat. And the threat is very real. The threat of autocracy is real. This is a young country. There's really no guarantee. Sudan couldn't remain a country. There's no reason why we should have to remain a country that is not an autocracy. But so you have to balance, stating the threat, and the media does have a responsibility to do that. And Joe Biden is not necessarily the threat, Right. So I think people sort of gravitate toward that. But I mean, I think just to bring it back to like sort of the Medgar of it, and I'm trying to think like him now, I'm trying to bring him into my head, is that if you don't state a problem, no one knows a problem, right? And the reason he went into the newspaper business is because no one was stating the problem. Mm-hmm. Right now, Trump is the problem. So we have to talk about it. It is on the Biden side to get their story and their narrative out. It's not our job. We have to state the problem. And right now, the problem is that we have a certain percentage of our country that wants to live in a dictatorship and will say so on TV.
They will. That's the reality. Well, Joy, congratulations again on the book, Medgar and Myrlie. It's out now. It's a great read. It's always great chatting with you, my friend.
It's always great. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for tuning in to Salon Talks. I'm Dean Obeidallah.